I dropped the gallon of milk. It exploded across the checkout counter, white foam spreading like evidence at a crime scene. Appropriate. Really? Because I'd just recognized the tax attorney from the IRS, and in 30 seconds, I was about to destroy her career. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up to where it all started. Because you need to understand how a woman with 35 years of forensic accounting experience ended up scanning groceries in Portland, Maine, wearing a name tag that said Ellen instead of Eleanor. 3 years ago, my husband David died of a sudden heart attack. We were supposed to retire together that year, travel to Scotland, finally take that cooking class. Instead, I scattered his ashes in our garden and tried to figure out how to keep breathing. My daughter Jennifer flew in from Chicago for the funeral. She stayed for 2 weeks. It was the most time we'd spent together since she'd gotten married to Marcus 8 years earlier. I was grateful. Lonely people make terrible decisions, and I was drowning in loneliness. "Mom, you look exhausted," Jennifer said one morning, finding me at the kitchen table surrounded by bills and bank statements. "Why don't you let Marcus handle this stuff for a while? He's got his MBA, and honestly, you've got enough on your plate with grief and everything." I should have said no. I'd built a career exposing financial fraud. I'd testified against embezzlers, money launderers, corporate thieves. I knew every trick in the book, but grief does something to your brain. It makes you soft where you used to be sharp. It makes you want to believe that people, especially family, mean well. "Just temporarily," I said, "until I get my bearings." That was my first mistake. The second mistake was signing the power of attorney Jennifer drew up. "It's limited, Mom. Just for financial management. Marcus can pay your bills, handle investments, make sure nothing gets overlooked. You can revoke it anytime." I signed it. I was a forensic accountant who signed a power of attorney without reading the fine print. The irony still burns. For the first year, everything seemed fine. Jennifer called every week. Marcus sent monthly financial summaries. The numbers looked good. My practice continued, bringing in steady income from consulting work. I threw myself into my cases, using work to avoid the empty house. Then came the subtle changes. "Mom, you mentioned that story about Dad's college roommate twice this week," Jennifer said during one call. "Are you okay?" I hadn't noticed. Had I repeated myself? The pharmacist called. Marcus mentioned another time. "Said you seemed confused about your prescription. Maybe we should schedule a doctor's appointment?" I did feel confused sometimes. Wasn't that normal at 62? Wasn't that just grief brain fog? "Your colleagues are worried," Jennifer told me 6 months later. "They said you missed a filing deadline." "You never miss deadlines, Mom." I had missed it. I'd been so tired lately. The doctor visits started. Marcus always came with me, always spoke to the doctors privately first. Memory tests, cognitive assessments. The doctors found nothing conclusive, but Marcus always looked worried afterward. "Early stage," he'd whisper to Jennifer, loud enough for me to hear. "They can't say for sure, but the signs are there." I started doubting myself. When I couldn't find my car keys, was it normal forgetfulness or something worse? When I forgot a client meeting, was it because I'd never written it down, or because my mind was failing? The gaslighting was masterful. I see that now. 2 years of careful manipulation, making me question every memory, every decision. Isolating me from friends by saying I'd become difficult at social gatherings I couldn't remember attending. Suggesting I retire from my practice before I embarrassed myself professionally. I finally agreed to retire. Another mistake. That's when they moved me into the assisted living apartment they'd found. It was actually a memory care facility. I realized it the third day when I tried to leave and found the exits required codes I didn't have. "It's for your safety, Mom," Jennifer said, tears in her eyes. Were they real? I still can't tell. I called my friend Patricia, my former colleague. The number was disconnected. I tried my attorney, Richard. Same thing. Later, I learned Marcus had been intercepting my mail, rerouting my phone calls, telling everyone I'd requested no contact because I was embarrassed about my condition. 3 months in that facility. 3 months of being treated like my mind was gone when it wasn't. 3 months of being told what I felt wasn't real. What I remembered didn't happen. Then came the day I saw the financial statement they'd accidentally left in my room. My investment accounts, which had held $2.3 million, empty. My checking account, $847. The house David and I had bought 40 years ago, sold. My retirement accounts, liquidated, with early withdrawal penalties. Everything. Gone. I felt a lot of things in that moment. Rage, devastation, humiliation. But mostly, I felt my mind sharpen like a blade, because nothing clears the fog like a fraud investigator discovering she's been the victim of fraud. I spent one night planning. Then I walked out during a fire drill. Nobody stops a confused old lady shuffling toward an exit during an emergency. I had $847, one change of clothes, and 35 years of experience finding hidden money. They had the money, but I had the skills. I took a Greyhound bus to Portland, Maine. Far from Chicago, far from Boston. Somewhere they wouldn't think to look because I'd mentioned hating cold weather. I paid cash for a room at a weekly motel that didn't ask questions. I bought a burner phone. And then I did what I counsel every fraud victim to do. I started documenting everything. But documentation doesn't pay rent. I needed income, fast, and I couldn't access any professional references without tipping off Jennifer and Marcus. So I applied at a grocery store. Any retail experience? The manager asked. I'm a quick learner, I said. It wasn't a lie. They hired me as a cashier. Minimum wage, no benefits. I was 62 years old with a master's degree in accounting, and I was scanning soup cans for $13.50 an hour. The name tag they gave me, said Ellen. The woman at HR had misheard my name. I didn't correct her. Ellen was fine. Ellen was nobody. Eleanor Price, CPA, CFE, had been declared mentally incompetent. Ellen, the cashier, could move through the world invisible. I worked the evening shift, 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. It gave me mornings to work on my case, because I was building a case against my own daughter and son-in-law, documenting every unauthorized transaction, every forged signature, every false statement to medical professionals. The work was meticulous, familiar. It was what I'd done for 35 years, just usually for someone else. The irony of investigating my own financial abuse while wearing a polyester vest and scanning groceries wasn't lost on me. My coworkers were kind. There was Destiny, 19, saving for community college. Marcus, a retired teacher supplementing Social Security. Lupita, sending money home to family in Mexico. They didn't ask why a woman my age was working checkout. Everyone had their story. 6 months into my new life, Mr. William Hayes started coming through my line. He was 78, tall and rail-thin, with hands weathered from decades of farm work. He bought the same things every week: bread, milk, eggs, coffee, the cheapest cuts of meat. How are you today, Mr. Hayes? I'd ask. Can't complain, he'd say. Well, I could, but who'd listen? He started coming through my line specifically, even if others were shorter. We'd chat about the weather, about Portland's rising housing costs, about nothing important. Until one evening, when he came through my line with just a bottle of whiskey. Special occasion? I asked lightly. Might be my last bottle, he said. His hands shook as he counted out exact change. IRS says I owe $340,000 in back taxes, putting a lien on the farm next week. My hands stopped moving. $340,000? For what period? Last 5 years. Says I underreported farm income. He laughed bitterly. Hell, I barely made any income. Dairy farming's been dying for years. That's why I had to sell the herd 3 years back. Every instinct I had started firing. Did you have an accountant prepare the returns? Couldn't afford one. Did them myself, like always. IRS auditor said I did them wrong. Claimed income I never reported. But I don't have any records to prove otherwise. The barn flooded 2 years ago. Destroyed everything. What about bank statements? Deposit records? Bank closed down last year. Got bought out. They say they're trying to retrieve old records, but... He shrugged. My lawyer says I should just settle. Says fighting will cost more than it's worth. I handed him his change and receipt. Mr. Hayes, what if the IRS audit is wrong? Doesn't matter. I can't prove it. But what if someone could? He looked at me really for the first time. Studied my face. You know something about this stuff? I shouldn't have answered. Ellen, the cashier, had no business getting involved. Eleanor, the forensic accountant, was supposed to be building her own case, staying invisible, not taking risks. But I thought about sitting in that memory care facility, being told my mind was gone when it wasn't, being told to accept something that was wrong because fighting back seemed impossible. I know something about numbers, I said, and I know something about proving the impossible. That's how it started. Mr. Hayes lived on a 200-acre dairy farm that had been in his family for 4 generations. His grandson was in the army, deployed overseas. His son had died in a farming accident 10 years earlier. The farm was all he had left of them. There's a development company been sniffing around, he told me when I visited the farm the next day. Offered to buy the land 5 years ago. I said no. They've come back every year since, each time with a higher offer. I pulled up the IRS audit report on my laptop, studied it the way I used to study corporate fraud cases. The pattern jumped out immediately. Mr. Hayes, the income the IRS claims you didn't report. Do these dates mean anything to you? He squinted at the screen. That's right after the development company made each offer. But I never accepted. Never saw a dime from them. Exactly. But someone reported $1,099 income to the IRS showing you received consulting fees from that company. $68,000 a year for 5 years. That's insane. I never consulted for anyone. I'm a dairy farmer. Was a dairy farmer. I dug deeper. The 1099s had been filed by a shell company with an address that turned out to be a UPS store. The development company's CEO was married to a woman named Diane Chen, who happened to be a senior tax attorney with the IRS. The same Diane Chen who had conducted Mr. Hayes' audit. This isn't a tax case, I told Mr. Hayes. It's a land grab. They filed false 1099s, triggered an audit, and made sure the auditor was someone who'd make sure you couldn't fight it. Can you prove that? Give me 2 weeks. I spent my mornings pulling court records, corporate filings, property records. I spent my evenings scanning groceries. I spent my nights connecting dots. The development company wanted the land for a luxury residential complex. They'd done the same thing to 3 other farmers in the county. False tax documents, IRS liens, forced sales. The farmers had all settled, sold cheap, disappeared. But none of those farmers had a forensic accountant in their corner. The IRS appeal hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning. I requested the day off work. My manager, who'd noticed me helping other employees with their tax questions, didn't ask why. I hadn't practiced law in Maine. Technically, I couldn't represent Mr. Hayes in any legal capacity. But IRS appeals aren't court proceedings. Taxpayers can bring anyone they want to speak on their behalf. I wore my best thrift store suit, did my hair, put on the gold watch David had given me on our 20th anniversary, the only piece of jewelry I'd managed to grab when I fled. We arrived at the federal building at 8:45 for a 9 hearing. Mr. Hayes in his church suit that smelled like mothballs. Me carrying 2 banker's boxes of evidence I'd assembled. Diane Chen was already there with 2 other IRS attorneys. She looked at Mr. Hayes with barely concealed contempt, then glanced at me like I was furniture. Mr. Hayes, she said smoothly, I'm glad you came. We've prepared a settlement offer. If you agree to the lien and sell the property, we'll waive the penalties and interest. You'll walk away with about $60,000 after taxes. It's generous considering your situation. I brought representation, Mr. Hayes said. Diane's eyes flicked to me. Oh? And you are? Ellen Price, financial consultant. Not a lie. I consulted. About finances. She actually smirked. I see. Well, Miss Price, this is a complex tax matter. Perhaps Mr. Hayes would be better served by— I've reviewed the case, I said. We're prepared to contest every finding. The other 2 attorneys exchanged glances. One of them whispered something to Diane that made her smile. We entered the hearing room. The appeals officer, a tired-looking man named Robert Morrison, sat at the head of the table. Mr. Hayes, you're appealing an audit finding of $340,000 in unreported income over 5 years. Mrs. Chen, please present the IRS position. Diane stood. She was good, confident. She laid out the case efficiently. The 1,099 forms, the lack of corresponding income on Mr. Hayes's returns, the obvious attempt to evade taxation on consulting fees. The taxpayer claims he never received this income, Diane said, her tone suggesting this was absurd. But the documentation is clear. The 1099s were properly filed. He cashed the checks. The bank records show deposits. Mr. Hayes started to speak. I put my hand on his arm. May I respond? I asked. Morrison nodded. I stood. The IRS position rests on 3 claims. First, that Mr. Hayes received consulting income. Second, that he deposited checks from the company. Third, that he failed to report this income. I'd like to address these in reverse order. I pulled out the first document. This is Mr. Hayes's Schedule F for each of the 5 years in question. His farming income was accurately reported. The IRS doesn't dispute this. What they claim is that he also received consulting income and hid it. But here's what's interesting. I laid out 5 years of bank statements that I'd subpoenaed from the defunct bank's parent company. It had taken every legal trick I knew, and a few I'd invented. These are Mr. Hayes's complete bank records. Every deposit, every withdrawal. You'll notice there are no deposits matching the amounts on the 1099s. Not even close, Diane frowned. The taxpayer could have had other accounts. He could have. But he didn't. I pulled out another document. This is a declaration from the FDIC showing all accounts in Mr. Hayes's name for the relevant period. 1 checking account, that's it. So unless he was stuffing $68,000 a year in cash under his mattress, which the IRS didn't find evidence of, these consulting fees were never received. One of Diane's colleagues leaned over to whisper something. She waved him off. Miss Price, the 1099s were properly filed. Were they? I pulled out the next stack. These are the corporate filings for Pinnacle Agricultural Consulting, the company that allegedly hired Mr. Hayes. The company was incorporated 6 weeks before the first 1099 was filed. The address is a UPS store. The registered agent is a service that files paperwork for anyone with $200. There's no website, no business license, no evidence the company actually operates. Morrison was paying attention now. Furthermore, I continued, I pulled the signature cards from the bank where Pinnacle Agricultural Consulting had its account. The person who opened the account and signed all the checks? Not Mr. Hayes. Someone named David Park. I laid down a photo. This is David Park. He's a paralegal at Greenfield Development Corporation, the same company that's been trying to buy Mr. Hayes's land for 5 years. The room went very quiet. Miss Chen, Morrison said slowly, were you aware of this connection? I conducted a standard audit based on the filed documents Diane started. Were you aware, I said, that your husband, Richard Chen, is the CEO of Greenfield Development Corporation? Diane went pale. The other 2 IRS attorneys went very still. This is highly inappropriate, Diane said. My personal life has no bearing. On an audit where you personally handled a case involving property your husband's company wants to acquire? I pulled out more documents. These are 3 other farmers in this county who were audited in the last 5 years. All of them had liens placed on their property. All of them sold to Greenfield Development at below market value. All of them were audited by you, Mrs. Chen. Morrison's face had gone from tired to angry. Mrs. Chen, is this true? I followed proper procedures in every case. Did you recuse yourself? Did you disclose the conflict of interest? Diane looked at her colleagues. They were both very deliberately not looking at her. I want to be clear, I said to Morrison, about what happened here. Someone created a shell company, filed false 1099s in Mr. Hayes's name, triggered an audit that coincidentally landed with the one IRS attorney whose husband would profit from the resulting lien. Mr. Hayes was told he couldn't fight it, couldn't prove anything, should just settle and sell. This wasn't a tax case. It was fraud. And it almost worked. I pulled out the final document. This morning, I filed a criminal complaint with the FBI regarding tax fraud and conspiracy. I've also filed a complaint with the Treasury Inspector General for Tax Administration regarding Mrs. Chen's conduct. The evidence is in their hands now. Morrison stood up. This hearing is suspended pending investigation. Mr. Hayes, the lien on your property is temporarily stayed. Mrs. Chen, you're to have no further involvement in this case. We're done here. Diane and her colleagues left quickly, not looking at anyone. Mr. Hayes sat frozen in his chair. I started packing up my documents. How did you? Morrison started, then stopped. He looked at me really for the first time. Who are you? Just someone who knows how to read numbers, I said. Outside the federal building, Mr. Hayes grabbed my hand with both of his. They were shaking. You saved my farm. You saved my grandson's inheritance. I don't know how to thank you. The IRS will drop the case, I said. The FBI will investigate. Mrs. Chen will likely face criminal charges. Your farm is safe. What do I owe you? I don't have much money, but nothing. You owe me nothing. He looked at me with watery eyes. Who are you really, Ellen? Because you're not just a cashier, I thought about telling him. But Eleanor Price was still building her own case, still staying invisible. So, I just smiled. I'm someone who understands what it's like when powerful people think you're too small to fight back. That should have been the end of it. Should have been a quiet victory. Go back to my motel. Back to scanning groceries. Back to building my case against Jennifer and Marcus. Instead, the news broke 2 days later. IRS attorney arrested in land fraud scheme, read the Portland Press-Herald headline. Diane Chen's photo was front page. The article detailed the conspiracy, the other farmers, the shell company, and buried in the 6th paragraph. The scheme was uncovered by financial consultant Ellen Price. My phone rang that afternoon. The Portland number I didn't recognize. Miss Price? This is Special Agent Sarah Martinez with the FBI. I'd like to talk to you about the Hayes case and about some other things that have come to our attention. My heart stopped. What other things? Your daughter, Jennifer Price Stewart, filed a missing person report 18 months ago, said her mother, Eleanor Price. Disappeared from a care facility in Chicago, described as mentally impaired and vulnerable. A pause. Would you happen to know anything about that? I could have run. Should have run. But I was tired of running. I'd be happy to talk, I said. Though, you should know, I'm not the vulnerable one in that story. Agent Martinez met me at a coffee shop the next morning. She was younger than me, sharp-eyed, professional. Your daughter is quite worried, she said carefully. She's been paying for investigators to find you. I'm sure she has. Hard to access someone's estate when they keep inconveniently being alive. Martinez's expression didn't change. Those are serious allegations. I have serious evidence. I pulled out my laptop. 35 years as a forensic accountant teaches you how to document everything. Forged medical records, unauthorized financial transactions, false statements to facilitate guardianship. The whole playbook. I walked her through it. Every detail. Jennifer and Marcus's 2-year gaslighting campaign. The power of attorney I'd signed. The systematic emptying of my accounts. The memory care facility I'd been essentially imprisoned in. Why didn't you go to police when you first escaped? Martinez asked. Because I was a woman who'd been declared mentally incompetent by multiple doctors, living in a memory care facility, claiming my own daughter was stealing from me. Who would have believed me? I needed evidence. Irrefutable evidence. So I've spent 18 months gathering it. Martinez was quiet for a long time. Miss Price, the Hayes case. That wasn't just about helping an old farmer, was it? It was practice, I admitted. A dry run. Making sure my mind was as sharp as it used to be. Making sure I could still do this work. And is it? Can you? I met her eyes. I just took down a corrupt IRS attorney and exposed a multi-million-dollar fraud scheme. You tell me. Martinez smiled for the first time. Miss Price, we've been investigating financial exploitation of the elderly for 3 years. It's epidemic. Families, caregivers, financial advisors. Most victims never report because they're ashamed, and when they do report, they can't prove it. But you have proof. I do. Would you be willing to testify? Not just about your own case, but to help us build cases against others? I thought about all the people like Mr. Hayes, like me. People who'd been told they were too old, too confused, too powerless to fight back. Yes, I said. But I have a condition. I want to help build these cases, not just testify, actually investigate. I have skills the FBI could use. Martinez raised an eyebrow. You want a job? I want to do what I'm good at. What I spent 35 years doing. Finding the money, following the trail, exposing the fraud. But this time, for people who can't afford a forensic accountant, 2 weeks later, Jennifer and Marcus were arrested in Chicago. The charges included elder abuse, financial exploitation, fraud, and forgery. The evidence I'd compiled was, as I'd promised myself, irrefutable. Jennifer called me from jail. I almost didn't answer. Mom, she said, crying. Mom, please. This wasn't my idea. Marcus. He said, we needed the money. He said you wouldn't know. He said you were getting confused anyway. That we'd be doing this soon enough when you really did need care. I'm so sorry. Please. I listened to her crying, thought about the 2 years of gaslighting, the isolation, the fear that maybe they were right. Maybe my mind was going. Jennifer, I said, you were my daughter. I would have given you anything you needed. All you had to do was ask. But you didn't ask. You took, and you made me believe I was losing my mind to cover it up. That's not something sorry fixes. Are you going to testify against me? Yes. She was quiet for a long time. I deserve that. Marcus, he manipulated me too. I see that now. But I let him. I let him convince me that it was okay because you wouldn't remember anyway. I'm going to plead guilty, Mom. I'm going to tell them everything. About the shell companies Marcus set up, the other elderly people he was doing this to. All of it. That surprised me. Why? Because you taught me to fix my mistakes. And because maybe, 20 years from now when I get out, you'll let me try to earn back one tiny piece of your trust. Not forgiveness. I don't deserve that. But maybe, eventually, trust. The FBI discovered Marcus had been running the same scam on 6 other elderly people. Jennifer's testimony helped convict him. He got 25 years. Jennifer got 8, with a plea deal. As for me, I didn't go back to Boston. Portland had become home. I kept my job at the grocery store, working 2 shifts a week. Destiny made it to community college. Marcus retired fully. Lupita brought her sister to the States. The other 3 days a week, I consult for the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. I teach classes at the community college on protecting yourself from financial exploitation. I've helped 11 families recover money from fraud schemes, and I kept the name tag. Ellen, because Eleanor Price, CPA, CFE, was a woman who got fooled by her own daughter, who signed away her power without reading the fine print, who almost lost everything because grief made her vulnerable. But Ellen? Ellen was the woman who dropped a gallon of milk and decided to fight back, who exposed corruption while wearing a polyester vest, who proved that what matters isn't your title or your age or whether people laugh at you. What matters is whether you're willing to stand up, speak truth, and remind the world that underestimating someone is the best gift you can give them. The grocery store manager still doesn't know what I really do. To her, I'm just Ellen, the cashier who's surprisingly good with numbers. Last week, she asked if I'd help her daughter with her taxes. I said yes, because that's what Ellen does. She helps people. 1 scanned grocery, 1 IRS form, 1 exposed fraud at a time. Mr. Hayes still comes through my line every week. Last time he brought me eggs from his chickens. The farm is doing better. His grandson came home from deployment. They're converting part of the land to organic vegetables, selling at farmers' markets. The development company filed for bankruptcy after the scandal. You ever going to tell me your real name? He asked last week, bagging his own groceries. I handed him his receipt. Ellen's real enough. He smiled. Fair enough. You want to come to Sunday dinner? Grandson makes a mean pot roast, and I think you'd like him. He's good people. Honest. I thought about it. About building a life here. About choosing who I wanted to be instead of letting others define me. I'd like that, I said, because that's the thing about losing everything. You get to choose what you rebuild. And sometimes, the life you build from the ashes is better than the one that burned down. I'm 62 years old. I scan groceries for minimum wage. I help the FBI take down financial predators. I eat pot roast with a farmer and his grandson on Sundays. I teach college kids how to protect their grandparents. And every single day, when someone sees my name tag and calls me Ellen, I smile, because Ellen is who I chose to be, and that choice saved my life.